Emma was the kind of girl who never liked saying no when a friend asked for help. She was a college student, busy with classes, part-time work, and her never-ending assignments, but somehow she always made time for others. She lived in a small apartment she shared with her roommate, Lisa, who was cheerful and outgoing, the type who always seemed to know someone new every week. Lisa worked part-time jobs here and there, one of them being babysitting for different families around town. She was good with children, patient, and always had stories to tell about her babysitting adventures. That Friday afternoon, Emma had just returned from a long day at the library when Lisa rushed into the room, looking anxious. "Emma, I need a huge favor," she said, dropping her bag on the floor. Emma, who was lying on the couch with her laptop, glanced up. Lisa rarely looked this stressed. "What happened?" Emma asked, sitting up. Lisa explained that she had promised to babysit for a family she worked for regularly, but an unexpected emergency had come up. She couldn't cancel on them because they depended on her, but she also couldn't be in two places at once. "Please, Emma, you're the only one I can ask. It's just for one evening. You just have to keep the little girl company, give her dinner, and put her to bed. That's it," Lisa pleaded. Emma frowned. Babysitting wasn't her thing. She had never really taken care of kids before. The thought of being responsible for a child made her nervous. "Lisa, I don't know, what if something happens? What if she cries and I don't know what to do?" Emma asked honestly. Lisa gave her a reassuring smile. "Nothing will happen. She's a sweet little girl, really easy to handle. And her dad will give you all the instructions. Just, please, Emma. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't really important." Emma hesitated, but she saw the desperate look in her friend's eyes. She sighed. "Okay, fine. I'll do it. But you owe me one." Lisa practically hugged her in relief. "Thank you. I promise, you'll be fine. And hey, you might even enjoy it." Emma laughed, shaking her head. She doubted she would enjoy babysitting, but a promise was a promise. That evening, after a quick shower and a simple dinner at the apartment, she put on a neat sweater and jeans, tied her hair back, and got ready to leave. Lisa gave her the address, which turned out to be in one of the upscale neighborhoods across town. As Emma made her way there, she couldn't help but wonder about the family. Lisa hadn't told her much, except that it was a single dad with a young daughter. Emma tried to picture what he would be like, maybe an ordinary office worker, maybe someone who worked long hours. She didn't think much beyond that. When she finally arrived at the address, she stopped in her tracks. The house standing before her was nothing like she expected. It wasn't a simple house. It was more like a mansion: tall gates, perfectly trimmed hedges, and a wide driveway that looked like it belonged in a magazine. Emma stood there for a moment, holding her bag tightly, wondering if she had come to the wrong place. She double-checked the address Lisa had written on the note. It matched. Slowly, she walked up the path to the front door and rang the bell. Her heart beat faster than usual. After a few moments, the door opened, and Emma's eyes met the man standing there. He was tall, with dark hair neatly combed back, dressed in a crisp shirt that made him look like he had just stepped out of a business meeting. There was something about the way he carried himself: calm, confident, and composed. He looked at her curiously. "You must be Lisa's friend," he said politely. Emma nodded quickly. "Yes, I'm Emma. Lisa couldn't make it tonight, so I came instead." He gave a slight smile and opened the door wider. "I see. Well, thank you for coming on such short notice. Come in." Emma stepped inside, trying not to stare at the grand interior. The living room was spacious, with elegant furniture, shelves lined with books, and a warm fireplace. It felt cozy despite its size. She noticed a little girl sitting on the carpet, playing with her dolls. She looked up as Emma entered, her big brown eyes shining with curiosity. "This is Sophie," the man said, gesturing toward the child. "Sophie, this is Emma. She'll be watching you tonight." Sophie smiled shyly and waved. Emma felt her nervousness ease a little. The girl was adorable, with curly hair tied in pigtails and a sweet face. Emma smiled back and crouched down to her level. "Hi, Sophie. I'm Emma. Those dolls look really pretty." Sophie nodded and held one up proudly. "This one's my favorite. Her name is Bella." Emma chuckled softly. "Bella's very pretty. Maybe you can show me the rest later." The father looked at his daughter with gentle eyes before turning back to Emma. "I've written down everything you need. Her dinner is ready in the kitchen, she should go to bed by 8, and if you need anything, my number is on the note. I won't be too late, but thank you again for helping." Emma nodded, taking the note he handed her. "Of course. Don't worry, I'll take good care of her." He gave her a grateful smile, then grabbed his coat and keys. "All right then, I'll be off. Sophie, be good for Emma, okay?" Sophie nodded, hugging her doll tightly. "Okay, Daddy." With that, the man left, and Emma found herself alone with Sophie in the grand house. For a moment, she stood there, unsure of what to do next. Babysitting suddenly felt very real. She looked at Sophie, who was watching her curiously, and decided to relax. "So," Emma said, kneeling down on the carpet, "what do you want to do first? Play a game? Draw? Or maybe you can tell me all about Bella?" Sophie's eyes lit up, and she began chattering about her dolls, showing Emma each one with excitement. Emma found herself laughing and joining in, slowly forgetting her nerves. It wasn't as scary as she had imagined. In fact, Sophie's innocence and joy made it easier. As the evening went on, Emma helped Sophie with her dinner, read her a story, and even built a little fort out of pillows in the living room. She realized she was actually enjoying herself. The little girl's laughter filled the room, and Emma couldn't help but smile. She thought about how she almost said no to Lisa's request and how she would have missed out on this small, unexpected adventure. By the time Sophie was yawning and rubbing her eyes, Emma tucked her into bed, turned off the light, and sat quietly in the living room, waiting for her father to return. She had come into the evening nervous and unwilling, but something about this experience felt different. She didn't know it yet, but this was just the beginning of a story that would change her life in ways she never imagined. The next time Emma was asked to babysit, it happened almost by accident. After the first evening, she thought it would just be a one-time favor. Lisa had returned and thanked her for covering, but to Emma's surprise, the little girl's father had specifically asked if Emma could come again. Lisa had told her with a teasing smile, "Looks like Sophie likes you more than she likes me. You're a natural." Emma laughed it off, but secretly she felt flattered. She didn't think she was good with children, yet Sophie's smile and laughter from that night had stayed in her mind. So when Lisa asked if Emma could cover another evening, Emma didn't hesitate this time. It was a Saturday evening when Emma walked again through the tall gates of the mansion. The nervousness she had felt before was gone, replaced with a strange sense of curiosity. As she rang the bell, she wondered if Sophie would remember her. The door opened, and this time it wasn't Sophie who greeted her but her father, Daniel. He looked slightly different today, less formal, wearing a casual sweater that made him look more approachable. His expression softened when he recognized her. "Emma," he said, his voice warm. "Thank you for coming again. Sophie will be happy." Emma smiled politely, trying not to seem awkward. "It's no problem. She was really sweet last time." Daniel nodded, stepping aside to let her in. "She hasn't stopped talking about you. She even asked yesterday if you'd come back." Hearing that made Emma's heart warm. She hadn't realized she'd made that much of an impression. As she entered the living room, Sophie came running down the hallway with her little doll in hand. "Emma," she cried happily. Emma crouched down, laughing as Sophie hugged her. "I missed you too, Sophie," she said, returning the hug. The little girl began talking quickly, showing Emma a new drawing she had made, barely giving her time to take off her coat. Daniel stood nearby, watching quietly with a smile. It was rare for Sophie to open up to people so quickly, and he noticed the difference in her mood whenever Emma was around. It wasn't just that Sophie liked her, there was a warmth, a trust that was unusual. "Dinner is ready for her," Daniel said after a moment, handing Emma a paper with instructions. "But I think she'll be more interested in showing you her toys first." Emma nodded, smiling at Sophie. "That's okay. We'll eat in a bit." As Sophie pulled her to the carpet to sit with her dolls, Emma glanced up at Daniel, who was putting on his coat. He seemed less hurried tonight, but she could tell he was still balancing a lot. "Are you working again?" she asked carefully. He paused before answering. "Yes. Just a dinner meeting. Nothing too exciting, but necessary." He gave her a small smile. "Thank you again for doing this. It helps more than you know." Emma shrugged lightly. "It's really fine. I like spending time with her." Something about the way she said it made Daniel pause. Most sitters treated it as just another job, but Emma meant it. He nodded gratefully before saying goodbye to Sophie and leaving for the evening. The moment the door closed, Sophie looked at Emma with a grin. "Do you want to play princesses with me?" Emma laughed. "Princesses? Sure. But only if I get to be the queen." And so the evening began. They built a castle out of cushions, turned blankets into gowns, and gave dolls names that sounded grand and royal. Sophie giggled so much that Emma couldn't help but laugh too. Hours passed without her realizing it. Later, Emma helped Sophie with dinner, carefully making sure she ate her vegetables. Sophie tried to negotiate by offering extra dessert in exchange for fewer carrots, and Emma couldn't stop laughing at her clever little arguments. After dinner, they sat on the couch while Emma read Sophie a story. Halfway through, Sophie leaned against her arm, slowly growing sleepy. Emma softened her voice, reading until the girl's eyes fluttered shut. Carefully, she carried her upstairs and tucked her into bed, making sure Bella the doll was by her side. When she came back down to the living room, she noticed the quietness of the big house. It felt so different without the sound of Sophie's laughter. Emma sat on the sofa, waiting for Daniel to return. She looked around again, noticing details she hadn't paid attention to before: the shelves filled with books, the piano in the corner, the family pictures on the wall. Most of the frames showed Sophie as a baby or a toddler, always with her father. There were no recent pictures of a woman. Emma began to piece together that Sophie's mother probably wasn't around. It made her wonder about Daniel. He seemed kind, but there was a distance in his eyes, like someone who carried a lot on his shoulders. She thought about how much effort it must take to raise a daughter alone while also running whatever important work he did. The sound of the door unlocking broke her thoughts. Daniel entered, loosening his coat and looking slightly tired but calm. He looked around the room, then at Emma. "Quiet already? That means Sophie's asleep." Emma smiled. "Yes. She tried to stay awake during the story, but I think I bored her to sleep." Daniel chuckled softly. "If you managed to get her to bed without a fuss, that's impressive. Usually, she finds 100 reasons to delay it." Emma laughed too. "She's very clever. She almost convinced me to give her double dessert tonight." Daniel smiled at the thought, then his eyes softened. "You're very good with her. It's not easy for Sophie to open up, but with you, it's different. She feels comfortable." Emma felt a little shy hearing that. "She's just a sweet kid. I didn't really do anything." "No," Daniel said, shaking his head lightly. You did. And I appreciate it more than you know. There was a moment of silence, not awkward, but thoughtful. Emma realized that for the first time, she wasn't just babysitting. She was getting a glimpse into a family's world, a world much different from hers. She didn't know much about Daniel yet, but she could tell he wasn't just another parent. There was something about the way he carried himself, something calm yet powerful, that made her curious. Before she left, Daniel handed her an envelope. Emma tried to refuse, saying it wasn't necessary, but he insisted. Your time is valuable. Please accept it. She thanked him and walked home that night with a strange feeling. She had gone to babysit, but it didn't feel like just a job anymore. Something about Sophie's innocence and Daniel's quiet gratitude lingered in her mind. She didn't know why, but she wanted to come back again. And somewhere deep inside, though she couldn't admit it yet, she already felt that her life was slowly being pulled into theirs one evening at a time. Emma's visits to Daniel's house slowly became a regular part of her weeks. At first, she thought it would only be temporary, just until Lisa could return to her babysitting job. But to her surprise, Sophie had grown so attached to her that Daniel began calling directly, asking if Emma could come instead. Lisa didn't seem to mind. She laughed one evening and told Emma, "I think you've been promoted. Sophie clearly likes you better than me." Emma smiled but didn't know how to feel about it. She had never planned on becoming anyone's regular babysitter, yet here she was, looking forward to evenings at the grand house. It wasn't just Sophie who kept her coming back, it was also the atmosphere, the way Daniel spoke to her, the quiet but meaningful exchanges they had whenever he returned from his meetings. One rainy Friday evening, Emma arrived at the house with an umbrella dripping water on the porch. Sophie ran to the door before Daniel could even reach it. "Emma! Come in," she shouted happily, grabbing Emma's hand. Her little curls bounced as she pulled her inside. Daniel followed, shaking his head with a small smile. "She doesn't even let me say hello anymore. You've completely stolen her attention." Emma laughed softly. "That's not true. She talks about you all the time." Sophie tugged Emma to the living room. "We're going to bake cookies today. Daddy said it's okay if you help me." Emma raised an eyebrow and looked at Daniel, who nodded. "Yes, but only if the kitchen doesn't turn into a disaster zone." The kitchen did, in fact, become a mess. Flour spilled on the counter, chocolate chips rolled onto the floor, and Sophie insisted on doing everything herself. Emma tried to guide her gently, but half the time, Sophie ended up laughing so hard that even Emma couldn't stop smiling. By the end, their cookies were oddly shaped but smelled delicious. When Daniel came home later that night, he stopped in the kitchen doorway, taking in the sight of Emma and Sophie proudly presenting their tray of cookies. Emma had flour on her sweater, Sophie had chocolate on her cheeks, and the two of them looked like they had spent the evening in their own little world. Daniel chuckled. "I see you both survived the cookie experiment." Emma blushed slightly, brushing flour from her hands. "We might need a little extra help cleaning up." Daniel looked at the tray and picked up one cookie. "Well, if they taste as good as they smell, I'd say the mess was worth it." He took a bite, his eyebrows lifting in surprise. "Not bad." Sophie clapped her hands happily. "See? I told you they'd be good." Emma couldn't help but laugh at the joy in the little girl's eyes. That night, as she walked home, she realized how comfortable she was becoming in their home. It no longer felt like she was just visiting to do a job, it felt like she belonged, at least for those hours. But with comfort also came confusion. Emma found herself thinking about Daniel more often than she admitted. She admired the way he cared for Sophie, how he always asked about her day, and how his eyes softened whenever he looked at his daughter. There was a strength in him, but also a quiet sadness that he tried to hide. Emma noticed it more each time they spoke. One evening, after Sophie had gone to bed, Emma was about to leave when Daniel offered her tea. She hesitated, but he gestured toward the kitchen. "Just a few minutes. I think we both could use a break." She followed him, sitting at the counter while he poured hot water into 2 cups. The kitchen was calm, the sound of rain tapping against the windows. For the first time, they talked beyond babysitting instructions. He asked about her studies, her part-time job at the bookstore, and her dreams for the future. She told him she wanted to be a teacher someday, though sometimes she doubted if she had what it took. He listened carefully, never interrupting, and when she finished, he said, "You'd make a wonderful teacher. I can already see it in the way you are with Sophie." His words stayed with her long after she left that night. No one had ever said it with such certainty before. The weeks went by, and Emma grew closer to both Sophie and Daniel. Yet, she couldn't shake off a small voice in her head that kept reminding her of the differences between them. She was just a college student struggling to pay rent, while Daniel lived in a world of wealth and success. She didn't even know exactly what he did for a living. He never talked much about his work, and Emma didn't ask. She didn't want to seem curious about his money or status. But the truth revealed itself one day in the most unexpected way. Emma was helping Sophie with a puzzle in the living room when the television, which Sophie had left on, began showing a news segment. Emma didn't pay much attention until she suddenly heard Daniel's name. She looked up, stunned, as the screen showed an image of him shaking hands with important-looking people at a business event. The news anchor described him as the CEO of a major company, a self-made millionaire who had built his success from the ground up. Emma froze. She stared at the screen, then at Sophie, who was humming happily while fitting puzzle pieces. Her mind raced. All this time, she had been babysitting for a man whose face appeared on national news. And he had never mentioned it. When Daniel came home later, Emma tried to act normal, but her thoughts were restless. She didn't want to seem different, but she couldn't hide her surprise. Finally, as she was leaving, she gathered the courage to speak. I saw you on TV today." Daniel stopped, his hand on the doorknob. For a moment, his expression changed, as though he wasn't sure how to respond. Then he sighed softly. "I was wondering when you'd find out." Emma looked at him nervously. "Why didn't you tell me?" He met her eyes calmly. "Because it doesn't matter here. When I'm with Sophie, I just want to be her father, not a CEO or someone people recognize. And with you," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "I didn't want our conversations to change. You treat me like a person, not like a headline. That means more to me than you know." Emma felt her heart shift at his words. She nodded quietly, understanding him in a way she hadn't before. That night, as she walked back under the streetlights, she couldn't stop thinking about it. Daniel was a millionaire, yet that wasn't what defined him. What defined him was the way he cared for his daughter, the way he spoke with kindness, and the way he looked at Emma as though she mattered, even when their worlds were so different. The discovery should have made her feel distant, but instead, it drew her closer. For the first time, Emma admitted to herself that she wasn't just fond of Sophie. She was beginning to feel something for Daniel too, something she wasn't sure she should. And though she tried to push the thought away, her heart whispered the truth she couldn't ignore: she was falling for the little girl's father. After Emma discovered the truth about Daniel being a millionaire, she couldn't stop thinking about it. She had seen him on the news, shaking hands with important people, dressed in the same confident manner he carried at home. Yet when he was with Sophie, or when he spoke to her, he seemed like a completely different man, gentle, caring, even vulnerable. It confused her. She had never been around someone with that kind of wealth, and she wondered if maybe she didn't belong in his world. Still, Emma couldn't stay away. Sophie was attached to her, and every time Daniel called, asking if she was available, she found herself saying yes without hesitation. It wasn't just about helping anymore, it was about the way her heart lifted when Sophie ran into her arms and the way she felt when Daniel gave her one of his rare but genuine smiles. One evening, Emma arrived a little earlier than usual. Daniel was still home, sitting in the living room while Sophie colored at the table. He looked more relaxed than usual, without his usual work attire. Emma greeted him and Sophie warmly, and soon Sophie was showing Emma her new crayons. "Do you want to join us?" Sophie asked, holding out a crayon toward her father. Daniel chuckled softly. "I think Emma's better at drawing than me. I'll just watch for now." Emma sat beside Sophie, and the three of them spent the next half hour together. It was the first time Emma saw Daniel so relaxed, laughing when Sophie made silly jokes, listening as Emma teased Sophie gently about coloring outside the lines. There was a warmth in the room that Emma couldn't ignore. For a moment, it felt less like babysitting and more like being part of something she didn't even realize she wanted: a family. Later that evening, after Sophie was asleep, Daniel offered Emma a cup of tea again. They sat in the kitchen, the silence of the house around them. Emma couldn't hold her thoughts in anymore. "Can I ask you something?" she said softly. Daniel looked at her with calm eyes. "Of course. Why didn't you ever tell me about your work, or who you really are?" she asked hesitantly. "I mean, I had to see it on TV." Daniel leaned back in his chair, thoughtful. "Because people treat me differently when they know. They see the money, the company, the success. But very few see me as just a man, as Sophie's father. I didn't want that between us. With you, it's different. You treat me normally. You talk to me like I'm just Daniel. That's rare." Emma felt her cheeks warm at his words. "I didn't mean to make it sound like I cared about the money. I don't. I was surprised." Daniel smiled faintly. "I know. That's exactly why I trust you. You're not here because of who I am out there. You're here because you care about Sophie. That matters more than anything else." Emma's heart tightened. She hadn't realized how much it meant to him, but she understood now. Beneath the polished image of a millionaire, there was a man who simply wanted someone to care for his daughter without expecting anything in return. From that night on, Emma noticed a shift in their bond. Daniel began to open up more. Sometimes, when he came home late, they would talk quietly in the living room while Sophie slept. He told her about his struggles: how he had lost his wife when Sophie was just a toddler, how difficult it had been to balance grief, fatherhood, and running a company. He spoke about the nights when Sophie cried for her mother and how helpless he felt not knowing how to comfort her. Emma listened, her heart aching for both of them. She admired his strength, but she also saw the loneliness he tried to hide. It wasn't just wealth and success he had carried pain, too. And in those quiet conversations, Emma felt a closeness forming between them, something gentle and unspoken. One Saturday afternoon, Daniel surprised both Sophie and Emma by staying home instead of going to work. "I cleared my schedule today," he said, smiling as Sophie jumped with joy. "I thought we could go to the park together." Emma was hesitant at first. She wasn't sure if she should join them, but Sophie insisted, holding both their hands as if she couldn't imagine the day without Emma. So the three of them spent the afternoon at the park, walking, playing on the swings, and feeding the ducks at the pond. People around them probably assumed they were a family, and Emma couldn't help but notice how natural it felt. Daniel carried Sophie on his shoulders, laughing as she pointed at the clouds. Emma walked beside them, feeling a strange mix of happiness and longing. It wasn't her life, not really, but for those hours, she was part of it. Later, as they sat on a bench watching Sophie chase pigeons, Daniel turned to her. "I don't remember the last time she laughed this much." "Thank you, Emma." Emma looked at him, her voice soft. "You don't have to thank me. I love spending time with her." He studied her for a moment, his expression serious but kind. "It's not just Sophie. You've brought something into this house that's been missing for a long time. Joy, warmth, it feels alive again." Emma didn't know what to say. Her heart pounded, and she quickly looked away, focusing on Sophie instead. She was afraid of what she was feeling, afraid it was too much, too soon. But Daniel's words stayed with her. As weeks passed, Emma realized her connection with both Sophie and Daniel was deepening. Sophie often asked if Emma could stay longer, sometimes even begging her to join them for dinner. Daniel, though always respectful, seemed to linger in conversations with Emma, his eyes holding hers a little longer than before. One evening, as Emma was preparing to leave, Sophie clung to her hand. "Don't go yet. Stay for one more story," she pleaded. Emma glanced at Daniel, who was standing nearby. He gave her a gentle nod. "If you're not in a hurry, maybe you could stay a little longer." Emma smiled softly, sitting back down with Sophie and reading another story. When the little girl finally drifted to sleep, Emma stood, ready to leave again. Daniel walked her to the door, and for a moment, neither spoke. The air between them was filled with something unspoken but undeniable. "Good night, Emma," he said finally, his voice low but warm. "Good night," she whispered back, her heart beating fast. As she walked away that night, Emma knew things were changing. She wasn't just Sophie's babysitter anymore. She was becoming part of their lives, part of their home, and part of something she wasn't sure she was ready to name. But deep inside, she already knew the truth: she had fallen for the little girl's father. And though Daniel hadn't said anything, the way he looked at her told her he might be feeling the same. The walls around their hearts were slowly breaking, and what lay beneath was something neither of them had expected to find: love. The more time Emma spent at Daniel's house, the harder it became for her to ignore what she was feeling. She loved being around Sophie, and she loved the way Daniel made her feel seen, but she was also afraid. She kept reminding herself that this wasn't her world. Daniel was a millionaire, a man respected in society, someone who lived in a grand home and attended important meetings. She, on the other hand, was a college student barely managing her rent and bills. They lived in two different universes, and Emma feared that crossing the line between them would only end in heartbreak. But the heart rarely listens to reason. One chilly evening, Emma arrived at the house to find Sophie waiting at the door, already in her pajamas. "Emma, guess what?" Sophie said, jumping excitedly. "Daddy said we're going to the zoo this weekend. And you have to come too." Emma laughed, bending down to hug her. "The zoo? That sounds fun. But are you sure I'm invited?" Sophie nodded eagerly. "Yes. I told Daddy it wouldn't be fun without you." Emma looked up to see Daniel standing in the hallway, watching with a smile. "She's right," he said softly. "We'd love for you to join us." Emma hesitated for a moment, but the hopeful look in Sophie's eyes made it impossible to say no. "All right," she said. "I'll come." The weekend outing turned out to be one of the happiest days Emma could remember. Sophie dragged them from one animal exhibit to another, laughing and pointing at everything with childlike wonder. Daniel carried her on his shoulders again, while Emma walked beside them, her laughter mixing with theirs. At one point, Sophie held both their hands tightly as they strolled through the park, and Emma realized how natural it felt, like they were a family. Daniel noticed it too. He kept glancing at Emma when she wasn't looking, his eyes filled with a quiet admiration. She wasn't like anyone else he knew. She didn't care about his money or status, she cared about his daughter, and she cared about him in ways no one else seemed to. That evening, after Sophie had fallen asleep exhausted from the trip, Daniel and Emma sat on the patio with mugs of hot cocoa. The night air was cool, and the stars shone brightly above them. There was a long silence between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt as though both of them were gathering the courage to speak the words they had kept hidden. Finally, Daniel broke the silence. Emma. I want to thank you. For everything. Emma looked at him curiously. You've already thanked me so many times. He shook his head. Not like this. You've done more than just babysit Sophie. You've given her happiness. You've given me peace. For years, I've tried to be both father and mother to her, and I felt like I was failing. But since you came into our lives, everything feels different. Lighter. Better. Emma's heart ached at his words. She lowered her eyes, her voice barely a whisper. You've both given me something too. I didn't realize how much I needed this until now. Daniel leaned closer, his voice soft. Emma, I don't know how it happened, but I find myself thinking about you, even when you're not here. I don't want to assume, but do you feel it too? Emma's breath caught. She wanted to deny it, to protect herself, but the truth spilled out in her trembling voice. Yes. I feel it too. I've tried not to, but I can't help it. For a moment, they just looked at each other, the unspoken feelings finally out in the open. Then Daniel reached gently for her hand, holding it with quiet certainty. I don't care about the differences between us, he said firmly. I don't care about money or status. All I care about is that Sophie adores you, and his voice faltered for a moment, but then grew steady. I care about you too, Emma. More than I thought I could. Tears stung Emma's eyes, but they were happy tears. She squeezed his hand, her voice shaking but full of truth. I care about you too. Both of you. That night marked the beginning of something new. It wasn't sudden or dramatic, it was gentle, steady, and real. Emma continued to spend time with Sophie, but now there was a quiet understanding between her and Daniel. They weren't just two people crossing paths by chance anymore. They were choosing each other. Over the weeks that followed, their bond grew stronger. Emma still worried sometimes, questioning if she was enough for a man like him. But every time she looked into Daniel's eyes, she found reassurance. He never treated her as less, he treated her as someone he respected, someone he valued. Sophie, of course, was the happiest of all. She began drawing little pictures of the three of them together, her, Emma, and Daniel smiling under a sun with hearts floating around them. One evening, she proudly handed a drawing to Daniel. Look, Daddy. It's our family. Daniel's heart swelled as he looked at the picture. Emma, sitting beside Sophie, felt tears forming again. It wasn't just a child's drawing. It was a reflection of what they were becoming. Daniel placed the drawing on the refrigerator, where it stayed as a daily reminder of how far they had come. Months later, their bond had deepened into something undeniable. Emma wasn't just the babysitter anymore, she was Sophie's friend, guide, and almost like a mother figure. And with Daniel, she had found a love built not on wealth or appearances, but on trust, kindness, and shared moments that made life beautiful. One evening, as they all sat together after dinner, Daniel looked at Emma with a tender expression. You know, when I first opened the door that night, I never imagined this is where we'd end up. I thought you were just covering a shift for a friend. But you turned out to be the answer to something I didn't even realize I was searching for. Emma smiled, her eyes glistening. I think I was searching too. I just didn't know until I met you both. Sophie clapped her hands suddenly, not fully understanding the depth of their words but sensing the joy around her. Can we always be together like this? She asked innocently. Daniel and Emma exchanged a look, their hearts full. Daniel pulled Sophie close, wrapping his arm around her, and with his other hand, he reached for Emma's. Yes, he said softly. We'll always be together. And in that moment, under the warm glow of the living room lights, Emma realized that her life had changed completely. What started as a simple favor for her roommate had led her to something she never expected: love, belonging, and a family that felt like home. It didn't matter that Daniel was a millionaire. It didn't matter that their worlds had been so different. What mattered was the bond they had built, the laughter they shared, and the future that lay ahead of them. For Emma, Sophie, and Daniel, it was no longer about chance, it was about choice. And they chose each other, every single day.